Rings fan, hence my Lego tower in the background here. And so this does include a lot of puns. This is your only pun warning, and we'll dive in. All right, so just a little bit about me. Microsoft MVP, data platform, and Fabric, also solution architect over at P3 Adaptive. And I also co-lead the Lexington Data Technology Group, which is kind of a user group here. We only meet in person, but if you happen to be in Kentucky doing the Bourbon Trail or maybe going to a horse race, let me know. Happy to connect you with people here. I'm also a co-author on Data on Wheels. It's a blog that my dad and I write on together. So feel free to check that out. I haven't blogged since FabCon, but I do try and blog fairly regularly. So check that out. Also, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I will have my LinkedIn info at the end of this slide deck as well as a link to everything we're going to cover today. So you'll have the slide deck, you'll have the Excel file we're going to use, and the output of the Power BI report we're going to build. So if you're taking screenshots, you're more than welcome to, but just know that at the end, I'm going to have a link for you guys to my GitHub, and you'll be able to download this slide deck from there. So with that, we'll get started. So starting off, we're going to talk about what OLTP means. So this is kind of the start to our data journey. I think of it as the raw state of your data typically. So this is something that's going to be built from day-to-day operations. It's typically used by frontline workers and applications. So what does that mean? What that means is that OLTP, the goal of it is transactions. So it is trying to quickly and efficiently run through and add, create, delete, edit new records that might exist in, let's say, your application. So if you think about it this way, every time that you are checking out at a sales counter, that's going to be a transaction. That's the simplest form of it. But every time you ring in a new order or somebody is checking you out at Starbucks, for example, that's going to make a new record in their sales table. And that sales table is typically going to be in OLTP format. The reason for that is so that if they have to go back and pull up your receipt, it can do that really quickly. It can also get all of your information at the same time that it pulls up your transaction. So the goal of it is to have all the data at hand so it can make really quick decisions and as well as display really quick data for the different applications. So with that, one example of that is order entry or banking. Like I said, point of sale systems. POS in this case means point of sale. I know it can be confusing, but essentially what we're talking about is kind of line level data. So just to show you an example of that, this is kind of a sample OLTP data set, what it will look like. And this is actually the one we're going to use today. So I've gotten some random data from Middle Earth. So we're going to be looking at some sales data on some long leaf products that are coming out of Hobbiton. I did use ChatGPT to help me make this. So if you want to do this on your own separately, I will have this table for you, but you can also make your own with your own different fandom if you'd like. So with that, I had it give me a data set. It's about 1 million rows long, but you can see here we have date, product name, the category, the price, how much got sold, the amount, the customer information, all on the same line. So what we're doing is we're going to be taking this and making it something that Power BI can crunch really quickly and that we can easily build reports off of. So again, this is not bad data. This is pretty typical how you're going to get data from an application. So what we need to do is take this application style data and turn it into what's called OLAP. So OLAP is essentially what I'm calling a citadel of insight, right? It is fewer organized facts of dimensions. And the idea here is that it's going to be really quick for querying and aggregations. So things like, hey, I want to check out my forecasting. I need to see my sales for the last month, building out a report. Those kind of queries are reading the data and aggregating it, getting different summations and metrics and measures off of it. It's much easier to do that off of a OLAP format. So OLAP, for example, is going to be something like this. Now, this is what we call a star schema. Our data set's going to be pretty clean, so it's going to look a lot like this, where we have one fact table and then a few dimensions outside of it. Typically, you end up with multiple fact tables, and I'll kind of show you how to handle that as well. But the idea here is that you have one table with all of your numbers. So think sales amount, think quantity sold, think revenue. And then in that fact table are just IDs. So you'll have things like the product ID, the customer ID, so on and so forth. And those IDs tie out to what are called dimensions. So I'm going to show you today how to do all this in Power BI. We're also going to talk about some best practices in building out your OLAP data set. The reason for that is that I see a lot of people who are, especially if you're new to Power BI, you get handed that table, that OLTP table, and you are not sure how to turn it into this quote unquote star schema that everybody talks about in the forums. So that's what I want to show you guys today is how you can build it from just a big wide table and turn it into something that Power BI can just absolutely nail every time. So with that, let's start our journey. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to follow the star, right? We're going to follow the star schema. Now, what does that mean, right? We talked a little bit about it, but we're going to be creating a centralized fact that is related to some dimensions that hover around it. So for example, a fact table is going to be measurable data, and I'm going to show you guys a way that you can kind of figure this out with your business users, or maybe for yourself, right? But the idea here is something like sales, revenue, inventory, things that you actually have a numerical question about. So if you had things like customer retention, what did that fact table look like? That fact table is going to be, what does customer retention mean? Do you need customer start date, end date, days that are live? Maybe you need to look at the last time they had a sale. All of that would live in your fact table for a customer retention report. So we're trying to think about what you're trying to measure, right? Sometimes, typically, that's going to be sales for all these examples, but you can do things like inventory. I've even seen more recently, just did one on ticket time requests. So somebody, filling out and making sure that their targets are within the range of dates that they had predicted. So things like that we can measure, and so that becomes our fact table. Dimensions are the context. So if you think about, for example, sales or revenue, typically those things are going to have, a customer, a product, a date. All of those descriptions can tie to multiple sales. And that's kind of the key here. So sales is what we're going to be crunching, but we need to crunch it in accordance with what customer sold it. We need to crunch it in accordance to who sold it and what product did they actually buy, that kind of thing. When did they buy it? All that good stuff. Now, another reason why we're going to be taking the journey to OLAP is that it is optimized for Power BI and the VertiPack engine. Now, I could go, there's entire sessions just on the VertiPack engine. I'm putting it here as a buzzword. At the end of this slide deck, I do have a whole slide that's just additional resources for if you're curious about more of these concepts. I really want to enable you to dig in deeper and understand what's going on behind the scenes. But for this session, I don't want to hold you guys all here for 3 hours. I think you're all lovely, but I would also like to enjoy my evening at some point, right? But with that, I'm going to leave it at the VertiPack engine really loves the star schema, and I highly recommend checking it out. So it is really cool, really worth looking into. The key here is that a star schema supports the powerful reporting scenarios and includes things like slicers, hierarchies, time intelligence, and so on and so forth. All right, so with that, we're going to hop into the council of stakeholders, defining our quest, right? One does not simply walk into Mortar, I think really closely applies to the scenario we're about to get into. So before we can actually get on to our adventure, we need to understand the true goals of our quest, right? You can't journey to nowhere. You need to know where you're going. So with that, we can kind of say like, hey, we can't actually read the mind of our stakeholders. This might actually include yourself, right? Every now and again, you might get a set of data and try and think through what can I do with it. The key to this is to think about what the make more money question is. That's how I would sum up all these questions. What is going to make me more money in my business? What's going to make me more successful in my job? What's going to make this stakeholder understand that their data is useful, right? So let's say somebody comes to you from a sales team, they're likely going to have questions around, hey, what regions are doing well? When, did any of our promotions help? Maybe a marketing team is going to ask you, hey, we need to understand if this discount did anything for us. Those are make more money questions that are going to make your report more useful, more interesting, and help you define what needs to be in the report. So once you answer that question, you can kind of go to the rest of these, right? At what level do I need to know what data is needed? Who's going to use this report and how do they need to slice it? What dimensions need to provide context to these metrics? Where does the data currently live? This is a very big question. I can't tell you how often I've gotten knee deep in a report and realized that I don't have the data I need to answer their question, right? So answering these with your stakeholders is going to be key. I would also, as a little pro tip, I would recommend writing down the answers to these questions. A lot of times what happens is people will try and fit 1,500 different use cases into one report. That's not always possible, and it tends to make it report unusable, right? If you end up with a report with 50 pages in it because 50 different people needed 50 different things, you end up with a report that is only used 1/50th by 50 different people. So just keep that in mind. You want to make your reports pretty focused, and you want to understand what is going to make this report useful and what its purpose is. And then if you need to, make more reports, right? Don't be afraid to do that. It's not a problem to make more reports. I think people are scared to make new reports sometimes, but it's not too bad, I promise. So with that, along the lines of making sure that we have our stakeholder needs really well documented, I recommend using what's called a bus matrix. Now, this is something that you can look up on your own if you'd like. This is a really simple example that I have here. But essentially what we have are these business processes that are going to be our fact tables on the columns there. And then across the top, we've got the dimensions, so the things we need to slice by. So for example, if I am trying to figure out my sales data, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit, I have talked to my business users and I've said, hey, I'm going to pull in your sales data. What questions do you have? And they might say something like, hey, I need to know what territory is selling the most. And I also need to know what product is selling the most. And I need to know it by the date that it got sold. So, I can write in little notes here if I wanted to. I could put, hey, they need the sales date for this report. That might be different than maybe an inventory report. Maybe I want to see what date the item arrived at my warehouse, so that might be a different date. I might need a store code that might be different than the sales store code because maybe the sales store is actually where it got sold out of, and the inventory is maybe like the warehouse that it's in. Things like that are going to be really important to understand, and I think having a visual like this just makes it that much easier to know if you're missing any data. It also helps you understand if any data is missing. So for example, as we're going to see in a little bit, on here I have that sales data needs a store. I don't actually have a store in my data. So I might flag that as red and talk to the stakeholders and be, hey, I can't actually get you the store because I don't have that data yet. Let me know who I need to reach out to get that data, and we can pull it in maybe on the next iteration. But this allows you to understand what might be missing. All right, with that, we're gonna hop into a couple of slides of best practices, and then we'll get to a demo because I'm a big fan of demos. So couple of best practices for you guys. The first one set of these is going to be focused on the actual keys. And so when I say a key, I mean something that's like a unique number that denotes every instance. So for example, let's say I had 5 territories. I would probably have a key column that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it would be tied to each individual territory. The reason for that, again, is compression reasons. I won't get too much into the VertiPack engine here, but if I can store that number column, just the number instead of the full text, in my fact table, I'm going to end up with a much smaller model than if I had stored the actual dimension name or my territory name in every single row of my fact table. Again, this will be a lot clearer to see, I think, than to talk through, but these slides will be available to you at the end. So if you were kind of like, hey, why'd she do it that way? Come back and look at these best practices and it'll kind of tie to what we're going to talk about in the demo. The next best practice I have listed here is that a column should be exposed in the model once and only once. This does exclude keys. I know I hate to throw it depends in there already. We'll put $1 in the jar later. But essentially, something like customer name should only live in the customer dimension, not in any of the fact tables. That's the whole point of having the keys. It also is going to keep your model small and less confusing for when you're developing, because if you're searching for customer name, it'll only pop up once. So little things like that are going to make your model much easier to use. Another step in here is going to be, columns should have unique and descriptive names. If I just had the word name in both of my customer and product dimensions, that's not going to go over well. I recommend being specific. It's going to make your life a lot easier when you're developing. That kind of brings us to the next best practice slide. I recommend using friendly names for columns. You can use spaces in Power BI. I know if you're used to other ETL tools, maybe you're coming from a data engineering background, you might not think of, hey, I need to put underscores in everything. It needs to follow a certain naming convention. But for Power BI, it's actually a good thing to use friendly names. We can put spaces in there, and we can make it easier to build something that is going to be beautiful and useful to more people. So with that, one other thing to put in here, a column, if its column is not needed, don't import it. We're going to break that rule at the beginning, and I'm going to show you guys, if we have time, a cool tool called Measure Killer. I have started using it at the end of my report development, so if I don't use it in a report, it'll tell me all the columns I'm not using. It's a free tool, highly recommend it, and it can, again, save you a lot of utilization on your capacity. So it can kind of cut down on the size of the semantic model, and it can also make for a leaner report, which is always a good thing. Again, each dimension should have one row per something. So think a product dimension is going to have just one row per product. And then nearly all relationships should be a one-to-many. Again, we're going to cover this. This does have its exceptions, but for this round, what we're going to be looking at today is going to be a one-to-many. Also, don't relate two fact tables to each other. We'll talk about that a bit more. That would be Measure Killer, the tool there for you. The last thing on here is key. So what we're going to be doing today is something that's a little bit unorthodox. We're going to be doing our transformations in Power Query because my data source is Excel, and I can't do SQL queries against Excel, unfortunately. So Roach's maxim in this case is something that says, hey, transform your data as far upstream as possible and as downstream as necessary. In our case, the most upstream I can go with an Excel file is to Power Query. So what that means is that as soon as I pull the data in to Power Query, I now have a tool that can do that transformation. I don't have to do it in DAX. I don't have to do it in a visual. But if I had SQL, what I could do is push this process I'm going to show you into SQL. So just keep that in mind. Everything we're doing today can be done in SQL, but I wanted to do it in Excel because that way, if you guys wanted to, you can repeat this using my data set. So again, all of it will be available to you, and I didn't want to lock that behind a SQL server. So concepts are the same. All right, with that, that is enough talking from me, I think. Let's actually get into some demos, right? That is the key. All right, so let me go ahead and hop into my files. So to start off with, I just want to show you guys, this is the file we're going to be working with. I have long bottom leaf, you can see here. I've got sales IDs. Now this one does come with its own IDs. I'm going to be getting rid of these and we're going to make our own. If you have a data set that comes with IDs, use those IDs. Don't do what we're about to do, which is to make our own. But I want to show you because typically a data set doesn't come in this nice where you end up with IDs for each of your dimensions already. But we've got quite a bit of data in here. If I were looking at this and making that bus matrix, let's say that I had certain questions around sales. So I got this sales data export from my ERP or maybe from a certain system. I would go ahead and look at this and say, okay, what I want to do is I want to see my number of sales. I want to see it by sales date. Okay, good. I have sales data in here. I also want to see it by product. Good. I have product. I've got a product category and subcategory. And then I've got my price, the quantity sold, and the total amount that got bought, right? So this is going to be my sales amount. It's going to be this times this will get me my total amount. I've got the region that it was sold to and the territory that that belongs to. So you can see I have some sales even going to Mordor. Interesting, right? So we're going to take a peek at that. All right, so what I'm going to do, because I'm using this in Excel, I want to show you guys another little trick that I like to do, which is to grab from the info section. I have this saved into a not Salesforce, OneDrive folder. And what that means is that I can actually come in here and hit copy path. And then inside of Power BI, I can do something kind of cool. I can use a web connector instead of Excel. If you want, you can do an Excel workbook here and just pull it from your downloads folder. But in case you're like me and you want things to refresh in the online service without a gateway, you can paste this in here. And then you notice this little question mark web equals 1. Oh, that is not an arrow. Come on, buddy. There we go. We're going to delete that, and then it will actually work for us. So when I delete that, it's going to no longer think I'm trying to open this in a web browser. That's the key. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Going to connect. And it's going to ask me what I want to connect to. In our case, this is not a formatted table, so all I have is this page option. If you have formatted tables in your Excel, those will pop up as different lines down here. But for us, we just have this one, so I'm just going to grab it from here. All right, we're going to hit OK. And now I've got my data in Power Query. Boom, step 1 complete. We are officially pros. We've pulled in our OLTP data. We are on our journey. So how do I get this into some dimensions? Now, if you remember, we go back to our mapping the star schema. You can see here, I've got these dimensions, right? So our business process we're going to be covering today is sales. And so what I need to do is break these other categories out into their own dimensions so that I can report off of them. Now, again, this is a weird scenario because technically I could do this really easily since I have product IDs and I have customer IDs and I've got territory IDs. That can make my job a lot easier. You'll notice I have a sales rep ID. It's totally null. It's not great data. I'm going to remove this column. I also don't need created at for my report, so I'm going to remove that column as well. But I just wanted to show you guys that a couple different ways. So the first way we're going to show you is the easy path. This is the happy path. If you have a unique ID, feel free to do what I'm about to do. If you don't, I'm going to show you how to make a unique ID. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and remove these columns to start. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this as my input. So I'm going to call this Middle Earth crops input. And I'm going to go ahead and disable the load from this. The reason I'm doing that is because I actually don't want this big wide table in my report, but I'm going to reference it in the rest of my tables. So when it refreshes, it only has to grab the data once. So again, these are just little tips and tricks that can make your refreshes run faster. So when I right click on this, I can now do something called reference. And you can do this while enabling the load as well. But I like to disable the load so I don't get confused later. And I'm not loading a million rows of data that I don't need. So I'm going to go ahead and click reference on this. It's going to create a duplicate for me. But now the source, if I go into Advanced Editor, is just my Middle Earth crops input. So you can see it just matches this table name, which is pretty nice. I can go ahead and just pull that in. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this, and we're going to make our first dimension. We're going to call it product. Maybe I'll call it dim product. All right, so dim product, the only columns I want in dim product are product ID, product name, and I'm going to go ahead and pull in product category and subcategory for now. So I'm holding down Control when I select these so I can multi-select. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit remove other columns. So when I hit remove other columns, I now have this pretty small dimension just called product, but I have a lot of duplicates, right? You remember how I said dimensions typically only have one row of something? This is how we do it. I'm going to go ahead and click on all of these again, and I'm going to right click and click remove duplicates. What this will give me is a unique list of all the products in my dimension. Pretty simple. Remove duplicates. And pretty quickly we'll go from 1,000,000 records to I think 5 records. There we go. So we now have 5 records with a product ID for each one. We have unique product name, product category, and product subcategory. Now, typically, if you had something called a product category and subcategory, you would likely have multiple products that fit in a certain category or subcategory. Unfortunately, for this data set, I did not give ChatGPT those instructions, so it did not make me a very diverse product category, but for this instance, I think it still works. We could see, that we've got honeycomb crumble as a suite. That makes perfect sense. Orc resistant netting, as a tool. They called it pest control, which I think is pretty funny. So on and so forth. But I would also be interested to know which regions are buying maybe orc resistant netting, right? I'd want to know that. So with that, you can kind of see we've got our dimensions set up. We've got one row per product, which is our something for this dimension. Now the next one I'm going to do is going to be customer. So what we can do is, again, we're going to reference this. Now, if you want my shortcut, what I typically do, because I'm a little lazy, I've been told it's efficient, but I think it's still a little lazy. I'm actually going to right click this and I'm going to hit duplicate. Pretty nice. Oh, making boxes again. There we go. What duplicate will do is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to duplicate my dim product steps. And instead of removing columns that don't include product, what I'm actually going to do is come back up to this step and I'm going to hit the little gear right here. And we're going to change which columns we select. So this way we don't have to redo our source step. We don't have to redo our remove duplicate. We just change this right here. The number of, oh, can't make a box when I want to. There we go. The number of columns that we're going to remove and which ones. So when I click on that gear, I get this handy dandy little checkbox. So from here, I'm just going to grab, let's say I want to do the customer one next. So I'm just going to grab all of the customer information that I want. So you can see I have customer ID, first name, last name, and house. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that information. And now when I go to remove duplicates, we just have a unique list of customers. This one's not as obvious, I will give that to you, because we have over 1,000 customers. And what Power Query does is it only grabs the top 1,000 rows. So it's only checking the first top 1,000, which means that we're not going to get a complete list in this scenario, but it is going to be a unique list and we can check that later. So the last step here is to change this to dim customer. So I'll do that. And then we just have one more. So let me go ahead and click on that gear again, and we'll do this one a little bit faster. The last one is going to be territory. So let's go ahead and do that one. Actually, I lied. We have one more, which is date. I cheat for the date, and I'll show you what I mean by that once we're done with territory. There we go. Nice, and then we'll look at our remove duplicates. This should also be much smaller. I think there's only, 5 territories as well. You might be wondering, should I sort this column? You can if you want to, but I typically don't do that in Power Query just because it takes up more resources on refresh. So we'll leave it at that for now. So what did I mean by cheating on my my date table? What I mean by that is I actually have my own Power Query date table that I like to use that I will be sharing with you all as well. And basically how I implement that is I have what's called an M script. It's very detailed. I've put a lot of notes into this. I do have another session on this as well. But basically, it grabs every single thing I would need to make my time intelligence really easy. So I'm going to go ahead and do new query for this one. I'm going to choose a blank query. When I choose blank query, I can then go into an advanced editor and replace it entirely. So pretty cool. I just have to change the start date. Now I know this data set starts in 2024, actually probably 2023, and we'll change that to just January of 2023. All I have to do is hit done, and you see it just came up with all of these columns for me. Pretty cool stuff. Again, I get a little lazy, so I have things like work days ago, weeks ago, days ago, all kinds of fun stuff. And I'll show you maybe if we have time how I would use this in a visual. But I'm going to go ahead and call this one dim date. There we go. All right, so I have my dimensions. How do I make my fact, right? That might be wondering what you're wondering. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy dim territory again. So we're going to do duplicate for this one. And we're going to change the name of it to fact sales. I'm going to delete my remove duplicate step. So you see this little X here means I can delete it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to change the removed other columns again. Now this time I am just grabbing my facts. So the only thing I'm grabbing is my measurable stuff. So I'm going to grab my sales ID. I'm going to grab a sales date. Now you might be thinking that is not a number. Why are you including it? Date is something that I can track over time, right? If you think about it, date is a weird thing where it is a dimension, but we don't necessarily need to make a key for it. We could if we wanted to. So for example, I can show you guys how to make that key if you want to use something like a sales date ID instead of using the sales date itself. But for this example, I'll start off with just showing you the sales date this way. And then when we go into making your own keys, I'll show you that as well. Now with that in mind, I am going to grab all the ID columns next. And then I'm going to go back and grab my measurables. So my measurables will be unit price, quantity sold, and total amount. I'm leaving out all the dimensions, right? All of these, the product name, the customer information, and the territory information, those are all captured in my dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now we have kind of this clean table. If you look at it, this table, if I click on one of these rows and we kind of scroll up, we can see everything in it. You can see that all of these are numbers, right? So when I say how things compress in Power BI, what I mean is that at the end of the day, when this loads into the report model, it now is storing 1 million records that are basically all numbers and very few records that have words in them. And the words take up more space in Power BI. So I want less times that it's repeated. I want that to be in its own dimension. I want that to be pulled out. So typically I tell people, if it's got words in it, 9 times out of 10, it is typically a dimension. If it doesn't have words in it, it's usually going to be in your fact. The only thing that I would call out that is not that way is something like maybe customer feedback. And even in that case, what I typically recommend is like a sentiment analysis of sorts. There are ways to do that. Again, ChatGPT is your friend. But something like that would turn those words into numbers. And then if you really need the words, you can pull them in. But typically words can be pulled out of a fact table and it's going to make your report run so much faster. So we're going to leave it at that for now. And I'll show you guys how to make the relationships, and then we're going to come back and make our own IDs. So we're going to pretend like these IDs didn't exist. But if you have IDs, you just saw me do this in about 17 minutes. We've just made a star schema from a OLTP data source. We've made OLAP now. We are officially amazing, right? So with this, let's go ahead and close and apply, and we're going to make the relationships. One thing I talked about very briefly was the fact that you're typically going to have a one-to-many relationship. So you'll have one dimension record for multiple records that exist in the fact sales table, in the fact table. Again, this one is 1 million records long, so it's going to run through fact sales. You can see here that it has Middle Earth crops input evaluating, but there's no rows associated with it. That's because we didn't load it in. So again, it's going to have to evaluate it to make the other tables, but we don't have to load our data in twice because we've referenced all of it off that one input. Pretty neat stuff. All right, so I'm going to go into the model view. You can see Power BI has done some guessing for us. Let's see if it did a good job. I can hover over this and it'll show me product ID to product ID. Good, check, good job. We have territory ID and territory ID, also good, happy with that. It did not find customer ID, even though it is also named the same. I have no idea why it does this. It's just every now and again it has problems. And that's okay, we're here to help. So I'm gonna go ahead and join that. It's gonna pop up this little thing for us. Key things here, we have a from table and a to table. The only reason why this matters, oh, and I see why it didn't do this. Okay. The only reason why this matters is because down here for cardinality, the first option before the colon is your from table. The second one is your to table. And so that's the only reason why this matters. I could put either of these in the different order, but the reason why this didn't make a relationship for us automatically is because customer ID in our dim customer isn't actually unique. So to check on that, I'm going to go into our table view. So if I go into table view and I'm on dim customer, I'm going to click on customer ID. So again, I've got this customer ID column. I've just clicked on any cell in there. And again, I'm in the report view. I'm going to go ahead and look down at the bottom here. And you see we have 300,000 rows and only 1,000 distinct values. So how did that happen? That's what we got to figure out. So I am going to go ahead. Yeah, that is strange. So one thing that I do when I'm troubleshooting this, just so you know, is I make a little table in my report and I will pull in from customer, my customer ID. I'm gonna have to tell it not to summarize. Don't summarize that, please. And I'm gonna pull it in again. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm gonna do count of customer ID so you can see I've got it here. And we can see that we actually have like 300 of some of these customer IDs. So what I want to do is I want to see if this is actually a unique record. So if you see I have 312, if I pull in customer first name, that drops down to 40. Interesting. So I have a bunch of customer IDs that are not unique. I have, Bilbo has 40 customer IDs under customer ID 1000, and so does Daisy, and so does Frodo. If I pull in their last names, you'll notice that that count gets down to 5. And if I pull in house, now I have my unique record. What that means is that my customer ID that I got from my fact table is incorrect and not unique. So we're going to start by making a unique customer ID record. And again, this is just how I troubleshoot. Everybody's a little different, but to me, this is the fastest way for me to realize, oh, okay, my dim customer is having a weird ID situation on my fact table. This is not surprising, mostly because I told ChatGPT to mess this up so that we could actually look at it. But we're going to go ahead and take a peek at this in the actual code. Yeah, Aman? Oh, just a React, I think that meant. Okay,
Yeah.
no worries. I do that all the time. The React button is right next to the hand up. So annoying. I'm going to go ahead and hop into our transform data, and we're going to make our own customer ID. So the easiest way to do this is we have remove duplicates, right? We have a customer ID on here. I'm actually going to get rid of the customer ID off this. Or you know what? Even better, I'm going to keep it, but I'm going to rename it. So instead of customer ID, what I'm going to name this is, let's see, usually I have a source system, and so I would call it customer and then whatever the system is ID. So let's say, for example, I might call this, well, even better would be something like Salesforce is a ERP I might have gotten this from. So we're going to call it Salesforce customer ID. What this does is, let's say that, for example, my customer ID, I need to look at it from multiple systems. Maybe I have stacked customer, or I've gotten customer from a bunch of other stuff. What I'm going to do is keep it in case I need to reference it for anything else. So for now, I'm keeping everything. I'll cut it down when I need to when I'm building the report. But let's go ahead and keep it. And we're going to make our own ID. So how we're going to do that is we are going to add a column, and we're going to do an index column from 1. Pretty easy, right? So I have this index column. Now remember how this profiling is done on 1,000 rows? What that means is that this 1,000 rows is going to be different every time it loads the preview. So I need a way to make sure that this index is going to stick for when I load it in. One way to do that is to add what's called a table buffer. Now, I only recommend this in times of need. If you can, do all this work in SQL because it's much better for something like this. But when we're in these situations, we have to be creative. And what table buffer does is it loads in all the rows of this table and puts the index on for us within the context of the entire table, not just those 1,000 rows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to write some M code. I know, crazy, but it's just table.buffer. We'll open it and we're going to put in rename columns. Actually, I think I can just do it like this. I could be crazy. We're going to find out. This is live coding at its best, my friends. Yep, that worked. Okay, so table.buffer, again, is going to give us an index across the entire table. Why is that important? Because of our next step. So this has created a column, and let's just zoom in here. It's created a column named index, and it's starting at the first position. So you'll notice it starts at 1, doesn't start at 0, and it's incrementing by 1. If you want to, you can change all those things. You can start it at 1001. You can start it at 1200 and have it increment by 5s. The idea here is that you need a unique record, or you need a unique index per record. So in this case, right, I have this, Salesforce customer ID. Let's say that for some reason I find out I don't actually need that ID, and I just need a unique customer first name, last name, and house. So maybe instead of having those 300 records, 300,000 records, I can just have the 1,000 records. I'm going to come back up here and I'm actually going to remove this rename column, and we're going to add our, let's see, there we go. We're going to take away our customer ID. Again, this index is going to work for if we kept the customer ID in there anyway, but I'm thinking through my business case, right? My business case is saying, okay, I just need unique records. I'm okay with just having 320 rows instead of 320,000 rows, right? Something happened with my IDs. We're just going to make sure that that is resolved. So I'm actually going to do some crazy stuff. I'm going to rename this column inside the Power Query step. You could do that, right? We're going to do it. It's pretty fun. So instead of index, what I actually want this to be called is customer ID. Right. So when I call it customer ID, again, I've just replaced index up here in the quotes. And it's going to take a little bit because it's doing that table buffer step. But you see, it already grabbed it, and I don't need to add another step in Power Query. Yay, less things to maintain, less code to maintain is always a good thing. So I've got that in here. I'm actually even going to rename this from added index to added customer ID. So this way, if I'm troubleshooting my code, I know exactly where I added that column. Let's say that in the future I need to add a bunch of other stuff. It's good practice to rename your columns as you go, or rename your steps as you go. So, all right. So now I've created my own ID. Let's see if this works. Oh, you know what? I need to tell Power BI where to get this ID in the fact table. So what I need to do next is join it back onto the fact table. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our fact sales table, and then I'm going to click this merge queries button. What that's going to allow me to do is merge our customer table back onto itself. Now you might be wondering, how is this going to work? Because customer ID is repeated, right? So we have a customer ID for like 6 different names or 1,000 different names. So I can't necessarily join back on the customer ID here because it's not actually unique. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to navigate to my source step. And now we have everything back, right? We've got our entire list of customer information here. And so what I need to do is make a unique record in both that I can join to. So I'm going to go back to dim customer and I'm going to make a new column. So I'm going to make this new column and let's do just a custom column. If you want to, you can even use custom or column from examples. It's pretty quick. Actually, why don't I show you that? So if I click on this, I can start typing in what I want the desired result to be, and it's going to try and help me. So you can see I have Mary, and maybe I want a space, and then I want hornblower, and then another space, and I want honey tree cottage. If I hit enter, it's going to guess what I want it to do, and it's going to write the code for me. So I can double check this, right? Text.combine, first name, a space, last name, a space, and then the house. Perfect. That's what I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I think merged will be okay for this. And I'll show you why in a second. So we've got merged here, and this is going to be a truly unique column that I can also make in fact sales to join this back to. So let's go back to fact sales. Again, the goal here is a unique column to join to. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to click column from examples. We're going to insert our step. And again, it's going to be Mary, hornblower, honey tree cottage. Gonna hit enter. It's going to guess. Yep, customer first name, last name, and house. Good to go. I'm going to click OK. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to do that merge step like I told you. So we're going to come up here and we're going to merge the queries. So I'm going to click on that. I click enter. So I have fact sales here. I'm going to grab my merge column, and then I'm going to grab from dim customer the merge column. And what this is going to do is it's going to calculate, and it's going to say, okay, fact sales has these merge column values. We're going to look at dim customer and we're going to check out what merged values we have there. And it's going to estimate matches for us based on that top 1,000 rows. So again, this won't be exact because it's going to go off that first 1,000 rows, like I mentioned. If you wanted to get crazy with it, you can do different join kinds. You can even use fuzzy matching. We're not going to go into all of that because we should be good. You can see it selection matches 1,000,000 of 1,000,000 rows from the first table. Perfect. That means I'm going to have a unique record for every customer in my fact table. So I'm going to hit OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull in my merged columns. And so I can actually now get the new customer ID that I just made and tack it onto this table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull out that column. So what I've done is I've hit this little arrow at the top. And what that lets me do is grab the, oh gosh, so many boxes. Come on, buddy. There we go. What I'm going to do is, you see this little table value down here, I'm going to break it out and grab the column I need. The only column I need is this new customer ID. So that's the only one I'm going to select. I'm going to select customer ID. You'll see it says use original column name as prefix. I'm going to uncheck that box. You know what? No, I think I do need to leave it because I already have a column called customer ID right now. So I'm going to need to remove the old customer ID from this table. But for now, let's go ahead and pull this one in. One thing to note up here is where you can kind of see the code that it's running. So you can see that it's got, it's pulling from dim customer, it's grabbing customer ID, and it's naming it dim customer dot customer ID. That's what it means by prefix. So go ahead and, yep, there we go. Now we have a true unique customer ID that it's pulling in. Exciting. So we're going to go to this removed other columns section again, and we're going to adjust this as well. So we are going to leave out the other customer ID and grab our new customer ID. So you can see I have the old customer ID field here, and I have the new one down here. So I need to make sure that this is the one that I'm pulling in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then we will rename it. Now, I could not name it just customer ID in the last step because we'd end up with 2 columns with the same name. So I could have removed the other customer ID before I did the merge. There are lots of ways to do the same thing. It might be a little bit faster to put it there, but personally, I like to have the step where I'm removing all the columns in one spot. So if I need to add stuff in, I can do that in one spot. And I'm okay having one extra step here to rename it. So we're just going to rename it by getting rid of the prefix. I've just double clicked on it to do the rename. You can also right click on a column header and then rename it from here, down all the way down here, rename. But I think of it with the Excel kind of function is the best. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close and apply. It has to evaluate both DIM customer and fact sales. The reason is that we have adjusted both, right? It might not seem intuitive, but because we've added that new record into fact sales from DIM customer, it is going to reload both of them right now. The table.buffer does add some significant overhead to the Power Query. And so that's why I typically, because our end result of DIM customer is under 1,000 rows, we didn't need to put the table buffer in there. But I wanted to show you in case you needed that 320,000 rows and you were wondering why your index didn't work. You would need a table buffer for that. And that alone is enough reason to push that kind of process upstream. So if you take these concepts and want to run with them, if you have a source that's like SQL where you can do transformations upstream, it's much better to do what I'm doing right here with you guys in another table or in a view that is slightly more upstream from Power Query. All right, so now let's check this out. You can see already this little table that we had, our total count of customer ID dropped to 320. That means what we did is working. So I'm going to hop back into our actual customer ID and let's just make sure. Yep, if I select a value in here, you can see 320 rows and 320 rows. Boom, we have distinct values for every single record. All right, so I'm going to hop back into our modeling view and Power BI decided, hey, you know what? I believe you. This customer ID does correspond to this customer ID. We actually have a unique value. I'm going to go ahead and treat this like a star schema. So pretty exciting. We officially made DIM territory, DIM product, and DIM customer. The last piece of this is to connect our DIM date back to fact sales. So what I'm going to do is just drag this date over sales date. And it's going to say, hey, do you want one to many? Yes, I always want one to many. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now we have a star schema, guys. We did it. And I'm really glad that I used the other IDs because I think we are just about at time. So with that, I do want to show you guys really quick how you would make a date key ID. And then I'm going to open.
You got all the time you want. So it's
thanks,
virtual. Nobody's kicking us out.
Oh, I still like to respect people's time. I really value you guys. So I'll go ahead and hop into fact sales real quick and just show you how I would make a date key. So dates can be tricky because you need a unique key, but you also don't want to do a whole ton of transformations to get one. So what I typically recommend is actually just converting it into a number. So if you want to, you can literally just come over here and change it to a whole number. And once I do that, we'll let it load for a second. It's going to create the Excel key number. So if you've ever used Excel and accidentally changed a date into a number field, that's the number this uses. So you can see we've got like this 45, 40, 450, 45,412, so on and so forth. I have the exact same key in my DIM date. So I have this date key that corresponds exactly to the numbers that we just made. So what I've done is I've now made a sales date key. So I'm going to rename it appropriately. And I'm going to close and apply, and I can just change the relationship to go off this key. And now my entire fact table is all numbers. So again, this is great for compression. This is also great because when it actually loads, you'll now have these joins going off of all integer IDs, which runs a lot faster. So I also, in my dim date table, I do have a lot of stuff that makes the date time intelligence really easy. So let's see,
Dan,
does
did
your
you
date,
see? I'm sorry. You
yeah,
see Jack's question about marking a date table?
I do. It does not default mark it as a date table. You would have to add that in there. But I can show you how to do that. One thing that I will note for you guys is like in my Power BI instance, I actually have turned off the auto date time calendars. So I kind of rely on my dim date table having more values available that I can make my own hierarchies off of. Because I don't really love the fact that Power BI makes those tables behind the scenes for you, because it can really quickly clutter up a model. So for example, what do I mean by that? Let's see. Actually, fun fact, we'll have to adjust this. You can see this is going from sales date key to the calendar now. I'm just going to swap that over. We're going to make this relationship active. And there we go. If you're ever wondering, by the way, I'll show you the date key thing in a second, but if you're ever wondering what columns IDs are on and you have this fact sales table that could be pretty wide, if you hit the collapse button, it will just show you what columns actually have joins attached to them. And so it's a really easy way to see what is being used. You can also right click on a table and then click collapse all, and it will collapse all the tables, which makes an even cleaner modeling view. But if I go to my dim date calendar, you'll notice, see if I click on this, how do I make it the date table? Do I need to right click it? Yeah. I obviously don't do this very often. I don't typically mark something as my date table, I won't lie to you. So I don't know, Kevin, if you've done that recently.
Sorry, marking as a date table?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still important, right?
Yeah, where do
The,
you do that usually?
You
Oh,
can
yeah,
see
here
it
it
right
is.
there.
Oh, I'm
yeah,
just
you just be
blind.
able to right click on it, yeah.
Oh my word. There it is, guys. We're gonna pretend like I didn't say that. There it is, right there. So you'll mark it as a date table. Sorry about that, guys. Um, and then you can choose your date column. Again, just calendar date in this scenario. And then you're ready to go. One thing that, again, I like to do is make little slicers like off of columns called days ago, for example. So for example, if I wanted to have a filter on all pages where it just grabbed a rolling 365, I can apply that filter. All right, come on, buddy. The actual filter on here doesn't quite do what I want it to ever, but if I grab this calendar date and let's make it into a short date, you can see that it's only grabbing through 5/7. So this is doing a regular or doing a rolling 364 days ago, which is pretty fun. I also have a column called years ago. The reason why I did that is because I've seen occasionally where people will have the advanced filtering or the relative date filtering, sorry, and it might be like in the last, let's say 12 months. You have two options for time intelligence here. You have months and calendar months. The difference between those is that months is going to be off of 30 days. Calendar months is not going to allow you to grab the current month. So for example, if I did 12 months here, you can see the dates that it selected start on 5/8/2024 and on today. If I change that to calendar months, it's only going to give you full months. So it'll give you, 5/1/2024 to April. So what I've done is I've made one called months ago. And if I pull months ago in, I can say less than 12. Apply filter. that should have done it. I don't know why it's being a little finicky here. Months ago. There it goes. Okay. It was just being weird. So it's got months ago. All right, I might need to look at that a little bit. Let's see. Oh, that's because I have it this way. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's do is between less than and greater than. So we want it to be less than 0 and greater than -12. Yeah, there we go. Less than or equal to. So again, it's a little finicky, but you can adjust this with the days ago and make sure that you're getting full months and a certain date range. So you kind of get some fun stuff. Again, for this one, years ago is probably the way to go. But I think it's pretty fun to just kind of play around with different date things. So, all right, with that, I'm going to open it up for questions, guys.
Let me just say, Christina, thank you so much for this
Yeah.
very clear presentation. And I love that you use ChatGPT and that you told it to put in a bug, that you
Yeah.
told it to mess up the IDs. That was just what a great use of AI. Let me ask a question. I really had assumed that dates get stored as numbers. I mean, I just assumed it. I never looked into
Right.
it. I never thought about it until tonight. So do you actually see the model decrease in size when you change from a date to a whole number?
I have, yeah, but it takes a lot of data. So again, this data set's only 1 million records in the fact table. When you get into the billions, little things matter. So converting it from a date to a number can even take away things like if you have a date time column and you convert it to an integer, that's going to make it smaller by default. But I believe date and time in the back end are not that different in size. Date is definitely smaller than text, but I do believe it is bigger than integer.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look back into that one, because I know in SQL Server, a date actually stored as a date data type is smaller than an integer. It's
Really?
it's 3 bytes versus 4.
Oh,
And I thought it was coming into Power BI as a number, and it's not getting, it is still hash encoded, not dictionary.
yeah.
So I haven't seen it change my models, and I tend to keep dates on all my tables, because
Well,
when you
there you
go
go.
to, yeah, when you go to the back end, it's a lot easier to debug things, querying with dates on actual date columns.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm down. We can keep it. We definitely don't have to change it to IDs. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
do have in the slide deck, I've got a bunch of links. So again, feel free to check out on GitHub. I've got the QR code here. I put a link in the chat, but I will have the slide deck updated there. And pretty soon I will upload the exact Power BI report we went through today in there as well.
So, hi, Christina.
Yeah, hi.
Thank you so much. This is my first session, but it was so clear and so understanding. I'm still a junior in this field, but I understood most of the parts. But one thing that really interests me is the way you use the best practices when you encountered there are a lot of customer IDs with a lot of duplicate values, right? Then you check the columns, like then you check 3 to 4 columns where you find the unique row, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Then the approach you use, like the column, the merge. So after that, I couldn't able to understand what we have did with the merge column in the sales, so that, and also in the customers, so that we get the unique values in the fact. Can you summarize a little bit in, like,
Yeah.
in short?
Yeah, so to summarize, what we've done is I ended up making a unique record in dim customer to start out with. So we had one table that had just one row per customer. And then after that, I made an index. And so what an index does is it gives you a unique value per row. So with a number, right? So I basically made a new customer ID that references our new unique values. But in order to get this customer ID into our fact table, I needed something to join it off of. And so I needed that to be my unique customer record. So I made this merge column, which basically takes each of these 3 components of a unique customer and puts it in one column so that I can join it onto fact sales. And then once I join it onto fact sales, I can now pull out the customer ID I just made. So again, I will share this with you. You're welcome to go through it a little bit more in depth. But you can see here that when I've merged the queries, I then expanded and just got my customer ID out. So I needed to make sure I could give it my proper customer ID instead of having it use the old one, because the old one was wrong. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's amazing, you know. Now I learned how to handle with the duplicates and how to
Yeah,
create unique customers, you know. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Christina.
Yeah, no problem. Great question. Any other questions, folks?
Oh, I have one more question. So
Yeah.
what after this fact table? But we understand that fact table have all the unique IDs of each and every dimension table. So this is a conversion of OLTP to OLAP, right? Using star
Yes.
schema. So what after this?
So after this, you'd make your report. So we have all our relationships now. If I wanted to, I could chart out, let's say, my sales date. And maybe I don't pull it from the date dimension because it's being a little finicky right now. Let's grab it just from fact sales, right? Because we have, oh no, I changed it. Never mind. We are going to pull it from here. So I've got my calendar date. And let's say I just wanted to see how much got sold every day. I can now just click that and I automatically have a chart that's telling me how much got sold on each given calendar date. I can even roll this up and I can see, per year, maybe I throw that in the legend and maybe I throw month day into my x-axis and get rid of calendar date. And now I can see year over year data trends. But I can do all that really easily now that I have a star schema. This kind of enables these quick calculations for Power BI to do.
Oh, that's
That's the right one.
awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. This is my first time I'm consuming all this knowledge.
Oh yeah, there's tons
It's
out there.
amazing.
Yeah, so definitely check out the slide deck. So again, I've got the link there, but in here I've got, trusted allies. So these are people that I would use. In the notes for this slide deck, I have even more articles that I recommend. And these are just really helpful places for you to learn more. Because I don't want this to be the only stopping point on your data journey.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, I'll put that up for you as well. Jack, what's your next Lego? I actually, weirdly enough, I have the box sitting behind me. You can't really see it. But it is it's going to be a Dungeons and Dragons tower with a dragon on it. But I need to paint my basement first. So I have to do grown-up things and then I can do fun things.
So I put a link in the chat, right? Our user group is part of the bigger Microsoft Fabric user group network. And so I put a link to that user group network and you could find other user groups that might be doing virtual. Or maybe, I don't know if a lot of people are really from DFW or you're in other places, but if you are somewhere else, like Christina's, right, they meet in person. But you can find, a bunch of user groups, even though it's Fabric, it covers Fabric and Power BI on that user group network. So I'd recommend going there if you want to find other people doing presentations. You find Christina and myself at a bunch of different data Saturdays, KP as well. We tend to travel around, and like she said, she's going to New York this weekend. But look at that and watch. If you're really looking to learn, the resources Christina had here are great. Go to SQL Saturdays, just get involved in the community. Go to Reddit.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn other stuff, you could join Christina, myself, and others on our Fabric Fridays live stream. So she covered for me, well, others covered for me last week too. It looked like it was a good conversation.
It was great.
Yeah. And
We missed
so,
you.
yeah, and we're going to have another good one this week, and we'll be talking about a tool to help you do some of this modeling called Tabular Editor. And the owner of Tabular Editor, the person that writes almost all of it, will be joining us as well. So there's a whole bunch of ways to learn. With that, are there any other questions before we start wrapping it down? I know my dinner's getting close to being ready.
Just a comment. It looks like on the page that you shared there, Kevin, for the meetup, there is in a couple of days, there's going to be a presentation on the Power BI measure killer that Christina shared with us today. So maybe that's something that you guys can look into if you want to continue diving into this journey.
Yeah, I didn't even cover that. I'm sorry, guys. I teased it and then didn't do it. But yeah, Measure Killer, awesome tool. Yeah, definitely recommend checking out that video. I know that Devin Cromwell is another meetup group, and they also meet virtually. So stack your schedule. Get a bunch of these virtual ones on your calendar, and when you have a chance, attend one every now and again. That's how a lot of us learn to begin with.
Hey, Christine, I just have one tiny question.
Yeah.
Here we
I like
go.
that I like that you showed the bus matrix. I don't see too many people talking about that. Do you happen to know who invented that?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Okay. But you're not gonna say it. That's fine. Anyway.
He's gonna make you say it. He's gonna make you
Yeah,
say
she
it.
doesn't have to say it.
It is Kimball.
Anyway.
Yeah. So
Or
for those
Kimball
of you who
Group,
don't
yeah.
know, Donald is a huge fan of Kimball, and all of us really are. We owe a lot of our practices to his methodologies. And one of the key ones that I've used in consulting especially is the bus matrix.
Right.
And I wish that somebody would have shown it to me when I was early on in report development, because it makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
When you're chatting with people.
And I don't have the link, but somebody showed how you could use the DMVs to find the relationships and basically build it in your Power BI model where you could have a little matrix that shows the bus matrix with your
Oh, that's
model
cool.
live, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. Someone did that last year.
That's very cool.
Okay.
Oh,
I know
lots of people first session. This is awesome.
Yeah, we built that into, I think it's still on Chris's site. There's a Power BI documentation report. And we built the bus matrix into that. So it automatically does it. So if you can't find that code, let me know, because I know I got that model. But it should be on Kratos BI site. It's kind of like the data gods Power BI documenting or something to that effect. But yeah, there's a whole page and it's just the bus matrix. I know it well because I built out that query. So
Cool. Well, thanks, Christina. That was really good for packing that all into 1 hour. I was pretty impressed. And
Thanks.
all the
I won't
PowerPoint
lie,
you
I was
did,
a little
too.
worried.
Okay. No,
I
you did
don't know
good.
if I'm gonna fit
Right.
this into an hour, so I'm glad it worked out.
I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording.